All right, Springs BOE, you're live. We're recording.
Great, thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being with us this evening. Prior to the start of this meeting, we were in executive session where we were going over hiring and contract negotiations. So at this time, I'd like to call the meeting to order. Julie, would you do roll call, please?
Sure. Barbara Dayton?
Here.
Tim Frazier?
Tim?
So I logged in before.
He's supposed to be.
You here, Tim? Dave Conlon?
Here.
Pat Braban?
Here.
Amy Rivera? Here.
Okay, I see a T up there. Is that Tim? Are you on, but you're muted?
Yes.
Oh, he is on? Okay.
I saw him before.
Great, thank you. If we could all rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So we're actually having two meetings this evening. We're going to start with a brief regular meeting before we get into our budget workshop. We have one personnel item and one finance item. So should I just go ahead and read the resolution, please? So under our personnel section, be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Springs Union Free School District, upon recommendation by the Superintendent of Schools, herewith authorizes and approves a certain letter agreement and general release between a particular probationary employee, number 2026, made known to the Board in executive session and the district, and be it further resolved that the Board hereby extends the probationary period for the above referenced probationary employee from September 29, 2022 to September 29, 2023, in accordance with the above referenced letter agreement and general release. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye.
Barbara, I'm back.
Here you are. Great. And then Mike, do you want to go over the finance item? Or should I just go ahead and move to that?
You can go ahead and read it.
Okay. This is for the roof rebid award. Whereas the Springs Union Free School District, the school district, requested field bids for the project entitled Spring School Roof Reconstruction, the project. Whereas the district received an open bid proposals for the provision of labor and materials for Spring School Roof Reconstruction, general contractor GC1 rebid. Whereas the school district's architect reviewed and evaluated said bid proposals, and whereas based upon said review and evaluation of the submitted bid proposals by the architect, the district administration recommends that the Board of Education award Spring School Roof Reconstruction General Contract GC1 rebid to Moore Consulting Corp. As the lowest responsible bidder, and now therefore be it resolved that upon the recommendation of the district administration, the Board of Education awards contract Spring School Roof Reconstruction General Contract GC1 work in the amount of $628,000 to Moore Consulting Corp. As follows: base bid number GC1 $628,000, total contract $628,000. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Do I have a motion to adjourn the regular meeting?
Motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, let's hop into the budget workshop meeting.
I'm going to kick off. Thank you, Barbara, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Henry. I want to thank the cabinet, Mr. Henry, Mrs. Cleary, Mr. Owen, and Dr. Turner for all their efforts on this year's budget. We were instructed by the Board of Education to do our best to come in at or below the cap. We've done that. Mr. Henry will show you what we removed from the budget to get to where we are, as well as what he's appropriating to offset the cost to the taxpayers. This large appropriation was only possible due to federal funding, the ESSA grants that the district received for the pandemic. We do not anticipate any additional pandemic monies to assist us. One area of concern that's been discussed here is class size. There's a chart, John, if you would bring that up for me in the budget presentation. This chart that John's bringing up talks about enrollment trends. I made a statement in previous budget meetings that shows that 6th, 7th, and 8th grade sections have always equaled 10, mostly due to scheduling. So a 6th grade section could have 6th grade could have 3 sections or 4 sections depending on the enrollment in that particular grade. But at no time does 6, 7, and 8 really go past 10 sections. But when you look at K to 5 over the last 7 years, you'll see that depending on the year, you could have 3 sections in 5th grade, 3 sections in 4th grade, 3 sections in 5th again. There was one year that we did have 4 sections in K to 5. That was in 2018-19. In 2019-20, there were 3 sections in 4th. 2021, again, we were back to 4 sections K to 5. And then for last year, it was the 5th grade that had 3 sections. So what I'm recommending this evening is that we keep a placeholder. We don't know what the enrollment is going to look like for next year. So we will have 1 or possibly 2 grades with 3 sections, depending on how this falls out with registration. We don't know what the registration will look like until probably August. And then we'll make a decision where we best need that position. That position could also be for AIS services. This year, our students already took the ELA exam in last week. We won't have those results to probably August. They'll be taking the math assessment. And if more students than currently have staff for more reading and math support for AIS, we'll have to provide additional services. So I'd like to keep that placeholder in the budget for a teacher. So at this time, I'm not accessing any teachers. I just don't know where that teacher's going to land. And of course, we'll keep the board informed. But out of the budget is 2 special education positions, as well as a TA position. We kept everything in place last year, not knowing what our enrollment was going to look like, not knowing what pandemic requirements were going to be. But I'd like to explain a little bit about how we got to reducing special ed by 2 positions. Currently, there's a special ed teacher assigned per grade, regardless of the number of students in that grade that warrant inclusion services, direct teacher consultant services, that support in their classrooms, in addition to their general ed teacher. In K to 1, there's a TA, that's not a special ed TA, but just a general ed TA. What we determined is that this is a very rich model. Most school districts do not assign a special ed teacher to a inclusion class unless there are 12 special ed students to the 12 general ed students in the class. We had a special ed teacher for 2 students in one grade and 2 students in another grade. Some of our self-contained classes have had as many children in their classes. So what we're proposing is something called the direct consultant teacher model. We spoke to New York State, and they are in total agreement that this is what most districts can really provide for their students. They would get direct teacher consultant for reading, writing, mathematics. On the K1, we already have teacher assistants assigned. When that special ed teacher can't be there for grades 2, 3, and 4, they will share a TA assigned to them. So at all times, that special ed child or children, depending on the numbers, will have additional support. On the secondary level, 5 through 8, we will stay exactly as it is. But at their committee on special ed meetings, they are having serious discussions about what subjects do they need support in. You have some special ed children that are really gifted in math. they don't need a second teacher hovering over them for math. Others have a real interest in science. So it tends to be that they need this support for certain subjects. And we're very fortunate in Springs that our special ed teachers, many of them are duly certified. So when we push somebody into social studies with a special ed certification, that person also is social studies certified, which really assists everybody in that class, not just the special ed students. So that model will continue for, as I said, 5 through 8. We've been in consult with, as I said, the state education department on this, and reviewed our regulations, which are section 200.1, and we're very confident in what we are providing to our students is what our students need. As of this evening, we still do not have a state budget, so as Mike puts out the state aid projections, we are hopeful that our legislators will come up with additional funds, but it seems that our governor has done well by our school districts, and we really don't anticipate any additional funds. As I've mentioned before, Mr. Assemblyman Thiel has indicated that he would again look for bullet aid, something more significant to help us with our high school tuition, but we will not have that information anytime soon. If you don't have any questions, I will turn it over to Mike at this point.
Thank you. You can go to the next slide, John. Next slide basically is the Springs mission statement. It's the same mission statement we've been presenting right along since the very, very beginning. Is this on?
Can't do the lights on, right?
What's that?
The lights on.
Yeah, there's no sound.
This is way down.
This one.
Second.
So that's the same mission statement we've been presenting right along. Haven't changed anything in it. Just to give you a flavor, an idea of where we're coming from, what we're looking to do. I'm not going to read the whole thing. I think everybody's seen it and heard it over and over again. Next slide, John. All right, so now we get into the meat and potatoes with the expense budget summary. It breaks it down into broad categories: total wages, employee benefits, tuition, and those are really the 3 largest categories that we have. They represent probably about 80% of our total budget. After that, we've got the BOCES services, debt services constantly moving upward. So we were able to go back in and take a real hard look at a lot of the numbers. We tried to skim down everything we can, look at contracts, BOCES charges, supplies, in addition to, as Ms. Winter just mentioned, about the staffing. Employee benefits happens to be a function of your staffing, among other things. So we were able to trim from what we presented in December, trim about $343,000 out of that budget from December. And if you recall, we've been talking right along that we needed to get between $850,000 and $900,000 out of that original budget to get us down to the cap. And I'll explain to that in just a second. But in the meantime, I've got a slide here. Next slide, John. Some of the budget changes. You can see there are quite a number. We've got the 2 special ed teachers, 1.5 driver positions, 1 teaching assistant. We're losing $104,000 off of our debt service, and that's the middle school bond. We don't have that anymore. This April is the last time we're making a final payment on the bond for that old middle school edition from 2002. So that comes right out. Pre-K, we are recognizing a savings of $45,900, and that's largely because we've gotten more funding from the federal government in the form of a grant that's going to be a recurring grant. So the pre-K is no longer going to be a burden of the general fund. It's now a grant that's going to pay for that. And there's a whole slew of other items, BOCES transportation. Just look at some of the larger items. We had equipment of $40,000 for 4 Promethean boards in the budget that we rolled over in December. And when we looked at that, we don't need that. Those Promethean boards were purchases for the new classrooms out of the general fund this current year, so we don't need them again next year. And you'll see there's a bunch of items of equipment like science, tech lab, and art, and the phys ed equipment. Again, those are all items that the district was supposed to purchase for use in the new edition. We don't have that this year, so we gotta take it out of the budget. On the addition side, the plus side, we increased the tuition charges by a mere 34,000, but we increased 337,000 of regular ed students because the numbers went up. On the special ed side, we had a bunch of additional placeholders from last year. We looked at this real close and we cut it down and said, we never know if we're gonna have 8 students or 9 or 10. So instead of having 12 or 13, we cut it back to, I think it was 9 is the number we ended up landing on. Is that about right?
Yes.
9 or 10, something like that. So we were able to pick up $334,000 in savings just in the special ed tuitions to East Hampton High School. And at the same time, we picked up a little bit of savings in what we call the hybrid or the co-teaching. Those are the students that attend East Hampton High School and need additional services. They're not full special ed, but they do need additional services. And they charge us a slightly lesser rate than the full special ed tuition. And then finally, we have now 2 students that are going to be attending Southampton in special ed instead of 1. Southampton's tuition rate is $116,000 per student. So we already had the budget for 1, we have to add 1 more. So it's an additional $116,000. When you net all that together, the tuition went up by about $34,000. In addition to all that, as we went through everything, we had a lot of settled contracts since December, which increased wages and salaries. Our general liability insurance will be increasing next year by just $10,000, $11,000, which isn't bad. We're paying about $90,000, a little over $90,000 for general liability insurance overall. And our BOCES services, we were able to cut $121,000 out of that, and all that together gives us the $342,946 that we're able to trim the budget out. The next screen, this is an analysis showing you how the tuition expenditures work. We originally, in the original simulation in December, we had 300 students, regular ed at East Hampton High School. We are actually at 314 students.
We're at 307.
Right now,
Right now, I'm leaving 7 additional students in.
so we increased that by 14 students, which equates to $337,000 increase. As I said before with the special ed, we started out with 15 in the budget, we cut it back to 10, so we reduced that by 5 students. And you can see the rate there at $66,931 per student. It's quite a bit of money. And in the hybrid students, we went from 35, we dropped it to 33. So we're able to realize almost $86,000 in savings in that item.
Right, and I just want to explain, right now, there are 9 special ed students at the full tuition of $66,000. And currently there are between 29 and 30, it fluctuates month to month. So we feel comfortable with that 33 as a hybrid number going forward.
And you're comfortable having 1 placeholder for special ed?
Yes,
Mhm.
yeah, it's an expensive one. We also have a placeholder in BOCES, just in case.
I mean, I know, like, for example, with having the placeholder for regular ed students, at least we have 7. And I know when we were trying to trim money out of the budget one of the previous years, we used to have like 5 or 6 and we cut it down to 2, but the past 2 years, we've had over 10 students per year extra in the high school. So for me, 7 is like,
It's in the middle.
better than nothing, but.
I actually
feel
looked
like
at
concerned about that.
every single bill for the last 2 years and did an average. And that's where we got hit, is the last 2 years.
Yeah.
Before that, the projection for this year was 292. And in September, we had 292 students.
And now we
Yeah,
have.
that's something.
Now we have 307.
And then the last item in that category, what I just explained before, is the Southampton students, special ed students who go to Southampton. We went from 1 and increased it by 1 to 2 students. Next slide. Next slide is a Same kind of format, but it compares what the 21-22 tuition budget was last year versus 22-23. And this is the real eye opener, because I've been saying right along with the additional students that we've got going from this year and going into next year, that I was saying we were gonna be incurring at least $500,000 more in tuition. It works out to $710,000 extra. And what this chart does is it gives you a breakdown, how much of the increase, like for instance, regular ed, how much of that $668,000 increase was due to just the increase in rates from one year to the next. We have a 5-year contract and the rates increase, they're already in the contract, by 2% each year. Then the other line is how much of the increase was due to increased student enrollment. And you can see the $668,000, the rate resulted in a $138,000 increase, but the additional students cost us an additional $530,000 just in regular ed. Same thing, we've got the same scenario going in special ed and co-teaching, showing you how the breakdowns work, the minus, the reduction in numbers. We had 12 last year in special ed, dropping that to 10 for 2020, 22-23. And the difference of how much it is due to the rate, and how much is due to student additional or decreasing students. So the overall tuition expenditure last year versus next year, or this current year versus next year, it's a $710,000 year-over-year increase. Next slide. The next slide is our tax levy cap calculation. And this is how we came up with the 5.46%. And I think the biggest thing to note on here is the current year exemptions, the debt service for the bond. That mainly is due to the new bond, for the new edition that we just opened up this year. We have been on an interest only for this year, and next year we are adding the principal payment to it, so we'll have principal and interest. So because this year was just strictly interest and it covered roughly a year and a half worth of interest, it was at about $500,000 in interest only. Next year, the principal and interest payment is going to go up by another roughly $550,000. So the total payments going out are going to be roughly running about $1.1 million in principal and interest per year. And that's for the next 20 years. So that's an exemption, an exclusion. It helps us, or allows us, I should say, not helps us, but allows us to modify the total need for the tax, to get us to the maximum allowable tax, or the tax cap of $29,096,127, which is a 5.46% increase over last year. Next slide, please. This is the state aid. Again, this is based on the executive proposal that came out in early January. There have been no other numbers that have come out this way, so I'm not changing that at this point in time. We'll wait for the final legislative the legislative number, because that tends to be the final number. So we're still at a 5.04% increase from last year. It's only an $80,000, almost $81,000 increase in revenues. Next slide, John. Other revenues. This is where we capture things like the pilot, which is the payment in lieu of taxes for the properties that are in Springs owned by PSEG. We always have roughly $15,000 worth of interest income in the budget for all of the different accounts we have, the money market. We have a couple of investment accounts that we keep some of the reserve money in, and it all earns interest at different rates. Tuition, looks like we're going to be collecting tuition for one student this year. We may have a second one, but I only put one in there for $98,000. And if you go on the state website, you can see our non-resident tuition calculation, which is the Seneca Falls formula. And for us, it's $98,649 for a special ed student in an elementary setting. And that's what we're looking for there. Our miscellaneous is kind of a catch-all. It includes just about any donations, a whole bunch of different items that go in there. insurance recoveries in case we have any kind of insurance losses and the insurance company reimburses us, so that would go in there. Included in here, we got rent payment. We're receiving $20,000 a year rent for the SYA building for the Universal Pre-K. They're paying us a rent for that building, we're paying it, and it's being paid out of the grant, but we're able to capture the $20,000 in revenue here in the general fund. The appropriated, this is where we pick up the big difference. As I said before, we were looking for $850,000 to $900,000. We increased the appropriated fund, the appropriated fund balance to use, which is the surpluses built up in the fund balance, to use to reduce the tax levy. So we went from $735,000 in December, which was the same number we used for the 21-22 school year, to $1,427,000. Now, I took a lot of time to basically do a forecast of where I think we're going to be by the June 30th in order to determine how much additional funds might be able to be put against the tax levy to help lower the tax levy, and this is the number I came up with, was 1.4 million. And after all of that coming down, we got leaves us with that tax levy of $29,096,127, and state aid, like I said before, was $1,879,000, and that's how we balance the budget with all of those revenue items to offset the total expenditures. The next slide, John. Again, our proposed budget for 2023 as of today has an expense budget of $32,888,886 versus last year. The expense budget was $30,801,034, which was an increase, which results in an increase of $2,088,752. Our percent increase over 21-22 on just the appropriation side of the budget is 6.78%, and the tax levy increase of 5.46%. The next set is going to go into a little bit more of a budget, tax levy and budget projection for 5 years. So the first one is just the appropriations, and I've highlighted in yellow the 22-23 school year, which is next year, which is what we're looking at the budget, and then we're carrying it out for the next 4 years beyond that. So we're looking at that 6.78% increase for 22-23. 23-24, I'm looking at a 2.77% increase. And again, these are all based on known contractual increases, things like that. 24-25, there is a very strong possibility that we may see quite a number of retirements. So we factored that into 24-25, and as a result, we're only going to see a 0.44% increase is what we're expecting in that year. But then after that, it's going to work its way back to roughly a 2% per year, year after year, year-over-year increase, assuming nothing else changes. Revenue projections is the next slide.
And again, this page we're just looking here with the percentage increase, not
Correct.
tax levy.
Right. This next page is going to have all the revenues, and it's going to have the percentage of the tax levies year after year. So again, 22-23 is highlighted in a beige to show you where we're at for today with the 5.46 anticipated tax levy. The 23-24, that tax levy increase I'm projecting to be 3.91. And again, remember when I said with the drop off of people, if we have retirements, we're not going to need as much revenue to cover those. So I'm only expecting a 0.49% increase in the tax levy for 24-25, and then we're back up to 2.41 and 2.46 for 25-26 and 26-27 respectively. 5-year budget summary, projected tax assessments, and what this chart shows is in 22-23, we got the 5.46%, which is at the tax cap, so we're okay. But in 23-24, we're gonna have to, it's looking at a tax and anticipated tax of 3.91%, but with the tax cap calculation, we're effectively gonna have to pierce the cap for that year as it stands right now. And again, going out 24, 25, 25, 26, and 26, 27, the anticipated increases of 0.49, 2.41, and 2.46. And I'm expecting that those numbers should be okay without having to pierce the cap at all.
So you're saying everything status
Quo, with no major changes or any craziness going on. This is how it's gonna lay out. Again, it's an estimate, it's a forecast.
Right.
Next slide, John. So this one's a little bit busy, but this is the calculation for the tax cap for 22, 23, all the way out to 26, 27. And those are the numbers I used in generating the forecast. Next slide, I'm getting into a section now that the board had asked me about, a what if type scenario. The question came down is, in the past, what if we had not reduced the tax levy below the tax cap and just brought it up to the tax cap? What would be the long range future impact, my estimates? So I'm looking at 22, 23, and I'm saying, all right, if instead of having that tax levy as low as we did for 22, 23, well, that's where we're starting at. And then moving it out, we're just keeping everything right at the tax cap, whereas prior to that, the scenario we used did play a little fluctuations with being below the tax cap, things like that.
You mean like in 2020, 21, 2021, 22?
Right. So I'm projecting that if we keep everything right at the tax cap, compared to not keeping it at the tax cap, it would have cost this, it would in the future cost us this roughly $4 million in fund balance. We can make that up on a year-to-year basis, but this is the cumulative effect out through 27, 28. The next slide, John. This next slide goes back to 2016, 17 and brings us to 21, 22, showing what the tax cap was, what the tax levy was, and it shows the difference between what the tax cap was and the levy. In 4 out of the 6 years, the tax levy was below the tax cap. And the cumulative total of that was $1.3 million that we basically left on the table. So when you combine that with the 4 million projection, you're looking at potentially $5.3 million that, because we didn't levy up to the cap, that we have to absorb out of fund balance, and where our fund balance funds can't sustain that. I'm just telling you, just can't sustain it. And that basically is it. I've got a slide here with the important dates to remember. The budget and property tax report card needs to be adopted no later than April 25th. That's also the date that I have to submit it to the state.
Mike, are we looking at April 12th as moving that up?
Yeah, we're thinking of April 12th, having a quick meeting for the board to adopt, which gives me some time to get everything together. So if you guys can come back next Tuesday to do a quick review and adopt the budget at that point, based on what we talk about tonight.
We have a lot to get out. We've already checked with Montauk Printing with the paper shortage, and the number of districts that have to get their budget brochures out. I recommend the 18th, Julie, no later than the 18th. Mike has the report card to get out to the state.
Right.
Last year, we know things got out late. We sent stuff, but it took longer than usual to get
In
to
the post office. I don't even know what the post office is like.
Well, our biggest thing right now is we need to get stuff to the printer to get it printed so we can get it back to get it in the mail.
Yeah.
They're requesting that. We spoke to Montauk Printing and they're asking to them early enough.
And then you've got the holiday in there. Easter is actually the 17th.
17th, yeah, so then that week, the 18th, we're closed.
I really want by the 14th to get everything out of here. If the board's okay with a quick meeting to adopt the budget on the 12th, I would appreciate it.
And I believe Julie did post the appropriation budget for 22, 23 with comparisons to 21, 22 on board docs right now. And then the 2 prior years, which show the budget and the actual expenditures for those 2 prior years.
Thank you, Mike.
Mike, Thanks very much.
Everyone goes along.
Why does that keep coming up? That's,
All right, we can hear you now.
Did that computer die?
Yeah, you just said something to me, Kim said about no sound.
I can hear again.
oh,
So I think you can hear it, but you can't go back.
oh,
Can you hear me? I can hear you.
Tim Fraser is talking and we don't hear him.
How do we know he's talking?
He said he was, he typed it.
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing, but now I can, but you can't hear me.
Tim Fraser is talking and we don't hear him. Is LTV still with us?
Yeah, we're still with you.
Do they know that Dave can't speak? Can't be heard.
Yeah, I can hear Dave.
Can you hear me?
LTV can. Timothy, we can hear Timothy.
Fraser's talking.
Yeah.
This is Dave. I'm sure it's the same as Tim. They can't hear me, I'm sure.
I can
Hey.
hear you, Dave.
And can you guys hear me? It's LTV.
Yeah.
We can hear you.
We can have a great conversation.
Yeah, it looks like the laptop went to sleep or just blanked out that the speakers are connected to.
Does LTV hear us?
John, can you look at this? This is completely dead. I don't know why.
I mean, I see everybody here.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is on. It's plugged in.
It looked like that computer was on mute for a minute, but now it's not.
It dropped out of the meeting.
No. Awesome.
Do you want me to get Dave on the phone? Or,
I just asked him if you wanted to call into LTV.
oh,
No, they can't hear us, so.
we don't even hear LTV.
LTV, are you there?
That thing is dead.
Yeah, I think we,
It's
a
dead.
little fuse here.
I said, welcome back in.
Oh, JR again.
Are we still mute?
Power strip is lit now, and the cord is lit, so.
Okay.
Yeah, you moved to a different plug, I think.
Yeah. I need a minute.
Yeah, this is our feed to LTV, so.
Oh, so we lost our feed to LTV as well.
So it's gonna take a minute to.
Welcome to My One Number, muted.
It was about the same time he tried to disconnect from the police station.
I need to give a minute to try.
And is still trying to talk.
Are you still trying to talk?
Yeah.
Hello, I just called
It's up on the
LTV.
screen. Tim Fraser is talking. He's
Yeah,
gotta
I'm
say
on
his
my
voice as
phone,
it is when he's
so.
talking.
All that power.
We just switched your laptop.
No, yours is coming back on. It's
Okay.
all connected to everything else.
Hi. LTV.
Oh, okay.
Hello? Okay. The laptop went dead.
Oh, the whole power.
We lost power.
We lost power.
Can you guys hear me now?
Letting, I don't know if that's
Can you hear me?
or is that us?
I don't know.
Yes, we
What
lost
about now?
power to that, from that outlet to everything that was hooked to it.
Which we're rebooting right now.
So, yeah, we're just rebooting now.
Guess it's time to go to commercial break.
Yeah, we're doing that now. It's coming back up now.
Okay.
Maybe we should have advertisers during our meeting.
There you go. Some
All right,
revenue
John's
for
gonna look
us.
back in again. I'll pull you back if we need you.
I vote for intermission with snacks.
Somebody just told me that they can hear us now. They just texted, so they can hear us now.
Thank you.
It says, okay, good now.
What do we say?
A listener.
Listeners, thank you. But we still can't hear Dave or Tim.
Tim or Dave, can you hear?
Yes. I can hear.
Maybe we just can't. Dave is talking. Maybe we just can't hear him.
Dave is talking and we can't hear them.
If you
They can
call
hear
the
us.
Zoom.
Can you hear me? I can hear you.
And they're not going to be able to hear us until they get that laptop back up.
Just give me a second.
Yeah.
Julie, are they on a Zoom link?
So they just sign back in again?
No, they're still in.
They're
Zoom.
still in.
It's us.
But
It's
got
us that
knocked
lost connection
Oh.
because we lost power and everything. They're saying that they can hear Tim and everybody talking through
off.
everything.
They're
We
still
just
on
can't hear
Zoom.
them.
We're not, yeah.
Right. So I'm
Zoom
trying
is-
to join
Zoom is
the
still
Zoom,
happening, just so
and it's
everyone's aware.
not letting me join. For some reason.
This is a new system, isn't this?
Yeah.
Mhm.
No, that's fine. It's the
Hey, that's the
electric.
power.
It's the power they cut out. Cut everything else out.
Okay, so I can't actually load the Zoom link.
We'll have to put that on the list of things to repair. Because lights are used. Because that's the, what's the, actually, yeah, because the
That's the
AC
thing
is.
is that Christmas vacation, oh, they had COVID, so they couldn't come to the winter recess, but something else came up, I couldn't be in everything. You do it in spring, you do it, I'm holding on to it.
No lockdown?
It's loading, but.
We're just trying to hook back up.
What's that? You switch to another computer?
No, the same one, it's just trying to reboot.
It's just right, because it was probably got a power surge to it or whatever.
So can LTV and whoever's watching here actually hear us?
They can hear us, we just can't hear them.
Let's text David, too, if they have any questions. Probably.
Yeah, well, we could, or we could just like go to public commentary.
Well, they might
The
ask a
public can
question.
hear the public comments. We
They're
can do
saying
that.
right now the public can hear LTV, Tim, Dave, and all of us,
Okay,
the public. We
Okay.
just can't hear them
all
right
right,
now.
so,
Tell them
How
to
about-
text us.
Is that going now? Looks like it's preparing with,
Can you hear me now?
I think it was probably got like a shock
Yeah, that's-
and then it shut it off.
Went out.
Springs BOE, can you hear us?
Yes, I can now.
All right, great.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I'm on my cell phone while I'm waiting for the laptop to start.
Okay.
Oh, 'cause you just came into the Zoom meeting. I got you.
No, it's just us. We need to make sure we get back on.
Oh, they still typing? Look for food, it is fine. Yeah. So did I. Actually, Christy made it.
Tell them to John.
Who?
Tell them we've gotta go, it's on.
Well, now I gotta put the meeting ID back in again.
Oh, we didn't have to before.
No, he probably did, yeah.
Stay there?
That's right.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now.
Can you hear me? It's Dave.
So, yes. Question. Okay.
All right, let me disconnect my.
Dave, can you hear that?
I can hear you.
Okay, all right, you sound okay now, so.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I can hear you.
All right, so Dave or Tim, do you have what are your comments or questions on the budget right now?
No.
Tim, you want to go?
I don't have any questions right now. It's very clear. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah. I was curious about the lease and the SYA and bus for 184,000. The savings there, is that what's this? Could Mike give us like just an update on what that 184 savings is in regards to?
On Springs BOA.
Oh, I'm sorry, it's up 184.
Can you hear us? Are we back?
Yes, we're back and we're good. We can hear the public.
Okay, Julie, can you start your video on the laptop? Or one of you start the video on the laptop?
Nice looking. There you go, Mike. This one's again. Yeah, you moved it. You moved it from one to another.
Was that on the budget cuts page?
All right, thank you, Dave.
Yeah.
On the tax.
Dave, you looking on the tax cap calculation?
Dave, you there?
What did you move it then?
Dave's on mute.
Mike, it was the lease for the SYA and the bus. It was an increase of 184,000. I could pull up the budget if you don't know what I'm talking about. But overall, I wanted to say, Mike, it was a good job. I mean, especially with going back and looking at the tuitions. That was pretty impressive how we were able to really parse that and look at that really closely.
Right. So plus we've got the bus band payments.
Right.
Roughly they're $27,000 per year for the last 3 years. Principal payment off of it. And we're gonna have another one, assuming that that resolution gets passed by the voters in May. So there'll be a fourth one.
I think we have Dave back.
Yeah, I'm back.
Great,
I'm
so
back.
could you just re-clarify what page you were looking at about your questions?
Yeah. Hold on.
He was saying something about less of a payment for the SYE building and something like that. Did you find the page it's on, Dave?
Yeah, it's on the tax levy cap calculations for 2022, 2023 under tax levy limit. It's number 2.
Number 2 on the bottom.
Number 2. It went from 300 to 484.
Yeah.
I was just asking him about that jump, that $184,000 jump. And I think Mike kind of answered it.
Yeah. On me, Dave. I'll have to get back to you on that one.
You see what I'm saying?
From, like the additional bus?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's, it's a combination of a bunch of things. I just don't
Yeah, that's fine. I
have
just
it in
asked.
front of me.
Yep. And then what about the bond, principal and interest? The, where was that? I wrote it down and I can't find where it is.
Yeah, our debt service is going from 525,000 to 1,093,000.
Yeah.
And that's next year. That's line 1. The big jump is because of the new principal and interest payment
Right.
for the bond for the new edition, which is now going to go up to about roughly $1 million a year. So if you remember last year, that 525, the bulk of that was on interest only, which was part of the payment on that new edition. And now we're jumping it another step up to bring the total up to 1,093,000,
Right.
almost 1.1 million.
Principal and
Next,
That's just a small save. Pardon?
next year, if, when we look at the budget next year, if we stayed at the 5.46 this year, if we found a way to stay under the cap next year, how hard would it be over the following 3 years to, I mean, it seems like there's still some wiggle room in those following 3 years.
I didn't have time to do that.
Okay. I mean,
Yeah, I didn't have time for that scenario.
yeah, because I mean, we were able to take off, we were able to take off 800. So, I mean, I think, if everything stays true, I mean, trying to do 400 for next year's budget doesn't seem out of the realm of possibility.
The reason we were able to trim this down by the 800, almost 900,000, was we took advantage of the pandemic relief grants that took money out of the general fund and paid for some of those expenses, leaving us a windfall surplus to this year. We're not going to have that surplus next year.
But then there are other favorable conditions next year and the following years that are going to break possibly in our favor. Is that not true?
Well, it could also go the other way. Remember, we're still seeing an influx of students coming in, and that alone could break your budget in a heartbeat, in a matter of weeks.
A reduction in high school helps.
A reduction in high school tuition would definitely help us,
Of course, I don't see that.
but I don't see that happening.
Well, we have 7 placeholders though, in general, right? And we have 2
you suggesting we get rid of all the placeholders?
No. I'm saying for this budget this year, we do.
Yes, we do. We have some placeholders.
Not
No,
seven.
I'm not saying we should get rid of them. I'm just saying we have a little bit of cushion.
If they're not used, they'll revenue, right there.
If they're not used, they would go into the,
General fund, yes.
yes.
To help the following year.
Just like this year, we cut a lot from BOCES.
Right.
Conservative, conservative.
I appreciate the hard work, Mike, on this, staying under the cap.
I mean, making all these cuts, we'll certainly find out this coming year, you know, if that's an issue or not.
Remember, you have a new building, so I think this is remarkable. New electrical bills, new maintenance bills, you know. Really, we did a really good job. We all did in trying to maintain what we have with an increase of a new building.
But, I mean, but, you know, what I was told about this, it really wasn't cuts. You actually looked at your finances and said, how is a different way to spend this money? You changed, not the program, but some of the programs they were run, you changed the way it was run, make it more efficient. And that's what you're trying to figure out. That's how you got it. You didn't cut anything. You just moved some things around to make it more efficient. Correct?
You have certain deductions.
Right.
That instead of a rollover budget, we went line by line,
Right.
which is
Right.
what you asked for in the past.
Right.
And we
And
did
I
that
think,
this year.
it was the last meeting, the meeting before, I had mentioned that with, heating oil, and even electric, that we might have to boost that up, but I did a thorough analysis of both, and I didn't have to boost it up. We're looking right now already that our electric bills are running a little bit lower than they were last year. And that's mainly because we've got all the LED lights that draw so much less power. With the new burners downstairs and the new systems that we've got going downstairs, we thought we were gonna be blowing through heating fuel, but it's tapered off, it's leveled off nicely. So, and we're not any more than we did last winter.
And you have a lot of new windows, right? A lot of new
windows, we buttoned up a lot of
Doors.
new roofs.
Just this front, right here.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of economies coming from more efficient installation and operations of our heating and ventilating systems.
But Mike, all along this process, which you've been through the last couple of years especially, we knew that we're going to have some rough years, and then it was going to be more consistently coming out the back end of this. And a lot of the reason that we're getting to be more consistent after the next couple of years is because of all the work we put into making it more efficient, more effective. But we knew we were going to go through some tough years because of the capital and because of the tuition. And it's just playing out the way that basically you predicted it for us. So there's no surprises here. I just think it's still going to fluctuate depending on what the economy does, depending on all kinds of things. But we have a good plan, a good map of where we are and what we're going to need to do in the next 5 years. Right. So that makes me feel better. Even though we're in a tough place for the next couple of years, we really have strategically put ourselves in a better place down the road.
Could have been worse.
Yes.
Tim, are you free on the 12th, next Tuesday? That is next Tuesday, correct?
Yes.
Or,
Yes, I am free.
yes?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Dave, are you free Tuesday also?
Yes.
That's Dave?
Yes,
Okay.
that's me.
Great. Great, so we will do the adoption of the budget
On Tuesday.
on Tuesday.
On Tuesday. Next Tuesday, okay. All right, so, Dave, you have any more questions, or Tim at this time?
No, I don't.
No.
Does Dave have any more questions?
I have a question about student enrollment.
Yeah, so actually, so at this time, since nobody else has any more questions, I'll open this up to public commentary. So if you have a question or comment for the board, please come up to the podium and let us know who you are. And have a time limit for talking, so people don't go on too long, but please feel free to come up and address the board.
So,
You just come right up here.
Microphone so that everybody can hear.
Up here.
Yes.
Hi, my name is Dawn Flagg. I've lived here for like 13 years full-time. And I've heard in the past that there are students that attend Springs that don't actually live in Springs. Is that true? And does the school district monitor that? And are we as taxpayers paying for those kids as well?
The school district does a very good job of monitoring that. We have what is the title? And we have an investigator who does go for any, to ascertain that everybody who is going here should be going here. Do residency checks and things like that.
High school students.
So, yeah, for both students who go here and for students who go to the high school, yes. Yes.
Good evening, I'm David Buda. I've lived in the Springs for about a little over 20 years. First of all, I commend you for coming back, getting the budget back down to no more than the budget cap law allows, so that's a good thing. On the other hand, I hope that this will be the last year that we see a simulation of a budget based on simply rolling over prior year's budget, which included a lot of things that, after close scrutiny, were just never really needed or didn't have to be included in the simulated budget to begin with. So if we start with a more realistic place, it'll be easier to accomplish a tight budget. A couple comments about the first part of the tonight's handout, the package. The enrollment trend is actually very interesting because it shows that if you go back 5 and 6 years ago, the school had more students. And that might surprise people who think that we needed a major expansion for a planned large increase in student population. That simply is just not the case. And if you look at the overall trend in average class sizes, you'll see that it has been trending downward. So I certainly think it's appropriate for you this year to plan on reducing net one classroom as unnecessary to maintain such a small class size. None of the class sizes in any of these years on your enrollment trends sheet came close to exceeding the 25 maximum that you've allowed. I would like Debbie, Deb, after I finish, if you could explain what exactly the teacher that won't be needed for a classroom or isn't anticipated to be needed for a classroom will do until you figure out where his or her services are needed. It seems like a luxury to have a teacher, if you have one less classroom, K through 8, but you're not accessing any of those, any teachers, classroom teachers. What are they going to do? And are they going to be a full-time substitute teacher? Who knows? Just if you could explain that. I have a couple of questions about tuition, Mike. I looked at the numbers, and and I appreciate that you posted on the website tonight as part of the meeting agenda, the budgeting and appropriation status report. Can you explain the general tuition amount of $162,630? That is not tuition for the high school students, either at East Hampton or Southampton. I'm just wondering what that number is. It's a separate line item in the appropriation schedule, and it matches the discrepancy that I counted. So is there another tuition expenditure that amounts to $162,630 that you can explain? Because it's in the budget.
What number?
What number?
Yeah.
It's special ed. We have 2 residential students.
Correct.
Because we have 2 residential students that we have to pay for. There's Springs residents, we can't provide services, and the only place that can is these students actually reside at 2 different facilities, and we pay the tuition for those facilities.
So that's for the 2 residential students. I thought it was 1 residential student, but you're saying there are 2.
There are 2.
We have 2 this year.
And then also, could you explain the BOCES student tuition amount of $375,000 that's in the appropriation schedule?
Correct.
What is it?
It's for students. BOCES students.
High school students that attend BOCES classes?
No.
These are special ed.
Special
Special ed
education
students
students.
that
They go to West Hampton Beach BOCES.
Elementary students or high school students?
One is high school.
I don't know the breakdown, but yeah, it's a combination.
No, one is definitely high, I believe they're both high school. 2 different programs, but one is at West Hampton Beach and one is at Sequoia. They're both high school students.
So these are students that are part of the high school population but have
No.
supplemental classes, or they're full-time at BOCES?
No, they're not.
They're full-time in
They're
BOCES,
full-time at BOCES.
and we pay the tab. Life
No,
skills?
they're not.
No?
These particular students are not life skills, so they're special programs, 2 special programs, one at West Hampton Beach and one at Sequoia and Holbrook.
And then my last question is a follow-up to what I asked at the last meeting. Mike, have you been able to parse out the medical expense costs for the inactive employees who are retired but are still receiving benefit payments? I believe that the number in the budget is a total of $3.4 million for hospital, medical, and dental, and that would be for both active and inactive.
I haven't had a chance to look at that specifically, but I can tell you that it's not as much as you think it is. I'm serious, it's just not. What do we pay, about $40,000 a quarter for Medicare? And then for the tuition, the premium for the retirees, it's, huh?
Yeah.
We look into it, but it's really not that much. And again, going back, I know you made a comment last time about the board should just do away with paying the retirees that can't. The health insurance program we use is through the civil service of the state of New York, and it's the New York State Health Insurance Plan. We're a participant of it, we've been a participant of it since the 70s, and the contract bears that we have to provide health insurance coverage for our retirees. It's contractual. It's not as what a lot of people think that it's not. It is. It is contractual. As long as the employee is invested.
But those retirees pay a certain percentage of
They
the
do
medical
pay.
expense.
They do pay something. They pay 30% or 50%.
Well,
It varies.
depends on the
Depends on their
contract
collective bargaining agreements. Everybody has to pay something into their health insurance, whether they're an active employee or a retiree. The retirees pay a little bit more than the active employees.
I could just close with one comment. I do note that if you look at a comparison of the current budget versus last year's budget, the largest amount, of course, is for salaries. And we have an overall increase proposed of about 6.5% in the salary item. 6.5% increase in wages and salaries. It would have been more beneficial in the page where you have the expense budget summary, rather than comparing the latest budget to the earliest budget. Instead, you would compare the last budget with last year's budget. And that's where I'm getting the 6.5% increase in total wages and salaries.
Hi, I'm Kate Saris, resident of Springs. I just had a question about the fund balance. It looks like on page 9 in the simulation, the fund balance was about 935,000, and then it was increased in the proposal to 1.4 million. Is that, am I understanding that correctly? Was the fund balance just increased?
No, as I explained when I talked about that, I did a full analysis of where we are today, what I expect to spend between now and June 30th. and looking at the revenues that I'm expecting to bring in, I was able to come up and see that we've got some situations where we're just not gonna spend all the money that we had in the budget. So there are some savings there, which then equate into going into fund balance. It's a surplus in this year that helps us fund the appropriation that goes into next year. So this way, we're giving it back to the taxpayers.
Sorry, I don't think I followed. So in the original budget, that was over the cap. The amount coming out of the fund balance was,
I didn't make any, because I didn't do a fund balance analysis at that point in time. So I just carried what we did last year and kept it the same.
right, so that was the
Then I did-
935,000.
Right, then I did an analysis and I realized I can move 1.4 million,
Right,
okay? So,
so really,
What that
we
means
got
is
to
we
cap
got-
by taking more money from the fund balance.
well, because we're gonna be adding more to the fund balance through the activity of this current year as we finish out this year.
So
Okay, and that was mainly because we were able to move money out of the general fund thanks to having these pandemic relief grants.
We got ESSA grants.
We got ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 grants to the tune of over $2 million.
And that amount is being put back into the fund, and that's where you're getting the extra 400,000 from?
Mhm.
Okay, and what, it looks like the fund balance is contributing about $1 million plus per year in your projection. What is the fund balance now and
Well,
how?
the fund balance is a complicated area because it includes there's a 4% amount that's the undesignated fund balance, which is, we always have that there. It's a cushion just in case we need, something comes up.
4% of what?
4% of the next year's budget.
That's what the state
That's what the
allows
state
you
allows us
to
to
keep
keep
your savings.
in reserve, in effect, in a savings. Then we can reserve things for specific purposes, like there's an unemployment reserve, a workers' comp reserve, a reserve for ERS and TRS contributions. $9 million, we only borrowed $16.9 million. Okay, so we use reserves in a lot of different ways to help kind of balance things out, and it's a way of trying to be fiscally prudent and plan for the future so that we don't have big giant spikes. Unfortunately, sometimes like these enrollments, they spike up, they drop down. We can't really plan for that, and we have no mechanism in our budget to be able to reserve for it in order to plan for it in the future to smooth things out.
We've asked our Assemblyman, Fred Field, to establish a reserve. He needs the legislation to agree with him and approve that. There's
Like
not,
tuition reserve.
right,
Yeah.
there's not many districts in our situation, so the chances of everybody getting behind him, might not be there. It's not gonna affect a lot of districts.
So the reserve is now 4% of the $30 million.
Not the reserve, that's
The
it.
fund
The
balance.
reserve is something separate, but,
The
right.
fund balance is 4% of
The
32,000.
undesignated fund balance is 4% of the 32 million, and in addition to that, we've got all the reserves. So in grand total, we probably have close to $7 million, almost $8 million in total fund balance. Okay,
Which that also gives us, establishes good credit for us and a good rating for any borrowing.
Which
that
is-
we do. Right, people wanna see that we have, funds available and that we're not.
which is why we got some great interest rates on the borrowings we did this past year, not only for the bond, but for the tax anticipation note and for the bond anticipation note, which pays for the buses.
Are there any disclosures so that taxpayers are able to follow or track what the fund balance is
It's,
on an annual basis?
it's in our annual audited financial report, which is on the website.
Thank you.
Would anybody else care to address the board at this time?
Hold on, I need to write that word down.
Hi, guys. My name is Summer Romeo, Springs resident. I have two kids who will be going through the school district. Great job getting us to the cap. I know it took a lot of hard work. There's a couple things that I would like you guys to clarify for me. Just quick, in the current proposed tuition, when you added up all the line items, there was $160,000 discrepancy. And that you said was because of the residential students effect?
Correct.
All right. For salaries and wages, why are we seeing such a huge jump this year? 6.5% seems very high. When you're looking at the 5-year projections, we're nowhere near 6.5%. So what happens in this budget for 2022 to 2023? Are we adding, or are we adding people by hiring, or are we just seeing contractual raises? 6.5% is pretty big. It would be close to 8% if it weren't for getting rid of the special ed and the one teacher assistant. So that's very high, in my opinion. I'm not a teacher, but I'd say it's high.
It's a very complicated thing when you talk about the contracts, collective bargaining agreements, and salary schedules and tables. Teachers have the ability not only to step up, to go from one step to the next, but in many cases, as they earn more advanced credits, they move from one column to the next. Those column movements alone are 5%. It's in their contract. The steps, the earlier younger teachers have much larger step, so their salary would increase by as much as 4%, but later on, down like step 22, 23, it might only be 1.5%. But it depends on where the teachers all fall, and all of those different factors are into it.
Okay. Are any additional positions being created in this year? Just the removal. Okay, so they are all contractual raises. Okay. For the 5-year projections for tuition for the enrollment, again, for this budget year, we're seeing a 7.5% increase. But then in the following years, we're only seeing a estimated 2% increase. Do you think that that's realistic to say 2% in your projections when this year we're seeing 7.5%? Because next year, if we're already going to be piercing the cap, and that's only at 2% enrollment increase, what happens when we're at 7.5% next year and you can't kick the can anywhere?
That's what I've been saying right along. We just don't know. You know, we're doing the best we can, and we're looking at. I didn't change the enrollments going out in those later years because I have no idea what direction it's going to go. So I just left it flat. So the only increase you're going to see in the tuition are the contractual 2% increases.
Okay.
And that contract ends 2
In
years.
2 years.
And then you have to negotiate again.
And with like the enrollment projections and everything, does the school have any sort of like relationship with the real estate markets here to see of the people who are buying homes in Springs right now? Are they going to be residents, or are they using them as second homes? Because I think that would really be beneficial in you guys knowing and being able to project accurately if your 2% is realistic or not. Because if we're seeing a trend where everybody's buying second homes here and you're seeing residents leaving, then maybe it would be worth some sort of a relationship.
Much over the years. Those second homes do not put any pressure on the school because those students can't go to our school because that's not their primary residence.
Right. Okay. All right, and we're comfortable with leaving tuition with as many space savers as there are. It's necessary, the 7 space savers. We think it's.
We've had more than 10 kids. We've been up more than 10 kids. I feel slightly uncomfortable having 7 and not 10. I mean, we've had over 10 kids for the past 2 years, which has been totally unexpected. Is that trend going to continue next year? We don't know. But we have to be as prepared as possible, and we have tried to, you know, cutting down the number of placeholders for high school. We did that in a previous year, and, you know, we weren't quite as prepared as we should have been. So we have to, you know, we got to leave those spaces there just in case. If you don't use stuff, you can come back to benefit the budget through what we can appropriate for the budget. But if that's not there, then we've got a big problem, because as soon as we have to pay that high school tuition and we don't have enough here, guess where it has to come from, you know?
And you had asked a question earlier, if we're gonna go down one section, which is what the report said. What is the teacher going to do if you have them allocated for a class and then next year they're not getting a class?
If you, and you were very helpful, Mrs. O'Neill. I pointed you in the right direction, and then together with my colleague, we created this chart that you saw tonight. We want a placeholder. Normally, our budget has a placeholder for a special ed teacher, a TA, a gen ed teacher, because we never know what that enrollment's gonna look like. I mean, right now, I'm gonna make a commercial break. Our kindergarten, our parents have to come out and register. They think that they don't have to because they have a UPK, but they do need to come out. So right now, I need only 3 sections in kindergarten, but my 3rd grade may go to 4. So I need that. Put that there. I spoke about the ELA and math assessments. We won't get those results until August. I may need to do some remediation with those students under the law that I don't have enough staff for right now. We are all tapped out, from speech therapists to occupational therapists. There's not enough people on the island to help us, but our current staff is maxed. So we're going into next year maxed and hoping to hold on, and we will use as much grant funding as possible to supplement. I told the board I won't be coming back to them or to this community to ask for additional positions. I'll use my grant money to supplement. So I think this is the tightest we've ever been into the next school year.
So potentially a teacher, depending on enrollment, a full-time teacher could be losing their job for next year if the enrollment's not there.
Yes, but I don't see that happening. I see more of the opposite happening, which in August and September, the principal will have to judge based on, okay, which grade has the heaviest hitters and the most new enrollment, the most unknown enrollment. It may be E&L. Our E&L population has gone up where we've hired E&L teachers over the last 3 or 4 years. So it may be a juggling act. We tell our staff probably in June what their placement's going to be, but they know that all bets could be off in August and somebody could be switched from kindergarten to 3rd grade. It's the best projections we can make in June. And then enrollment, it seems like the buses roll on superintendent's conference day when they do the test runs, and all of a sudden, oh, I need to register. And it's a phenomenon I still don't understand.
Okay, I think having that teacher placeholder is just as important as having our student placeholders, because if you don't use them, that will still come back to the taxpayers at the end as part of the, you know, the fund balance. So, but if you don't have it, you can really cause a problem.
And the particular teacher that's the last one hired also has a position to go back to because she was a TA here.
Right, but generally, if someone should have, you do exercise a position, last one in is first one out, and whatever extent.
And they get excess and they get invited back when a position opens up.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, guys.
Does anybody else have a comment for the board at this time? LT, do we have any callers?
No, we don't have any callers at this time.
Thank you very much. So you explained the placeholder, you've got your placeholder explanation, and you know, Mr. Booty, at a previous meeting, you had said, you know, you always get to the cap, you never go back. We did have a couple years where we went below what the cap was, because I think as a board, we felt very strongly that we'd asked our community to come out and support a big construction project, and we're very aware, you know, our community's resources, and especially over the last 2 years, what a difficult time it's been for some people. In the last 2 years, you know, we made sure we came in under the cap. And, you know, we have the best of intentions with that. If we had come in at the cap in those years, we'd be in a little different position this year, maybe going forward with the, you know, potential piercing the cap at some year, what have you. So I know you know, always feel that we need to, you know, charge as little as possible, as I guess were, but we really have to look out for the best financial interest of the district in the long term. And, you know, unfortunately for us, with the resources that this district has, being there at the cap is generally the best way for us to do that. And when we can give money back to our taxpayers at the end of the year, we can certainly do that. And that's, you know, but I think we have done our best as a board to really do the best that we can for the taxpayers of this district, along with our kids. So it looks like there will be a change to our schedule that was at the end of this presentation. So instead of the 25th, we'll be having our next budget meeting next week, on the 12th.
We have vote on the budget.
We will adopt it,
Adopt the budget.
so that all the paperwork can get out on time. Printing and paper shortages, mailing.
And I mean, there were a couple of good points made this evening about the way the budget was developed, and, you know, we come into it and we have this sort of dire situation, which ended up not being so dire. So I feel like, you know, going forward, we should review our schedule of how we do our budget planning and figure out, you know, if you're gonna rebuild the budget, we do that in, when do we start that? Is it December? Is it January? December. So we can come in with a realistic picture, and so we don't quite have the, you know, roller coaster of emotion as to what what we're gonna be, you know, what people are gonna be facing. Right?
I mean, I know it's hard, like, I mean, it would be nice to see the fund balance left over, you know, when we turn over, it's $500,000 increase, a difference in fees, that is to make the December, and from December to April, make a difference. Try to find those funds out.
It's usually hard to do the fund balance estimate more accurately until the end of March. You know, to do it back in December, there's too many open things still out there.
What was our first budget for February, correct?
We did our first budget meeting in, I think it was either the end of January or the end of February.
Yeah, I mean, so just, you know.
You're still not gonna have a fund balance.
Won't be accurate enough?
Not at
Maybe
that.
if we had a more accurate budget at the beginning, when we went into the process, if that was more accurate at the beginning, we could wait a little bit on the fund balance to see, you know, where things down there, but.
Well, that's part of why we were doing a lot of breaking it into different pieces so that we could hear about the different programs separately. Even though you didn't see the whole picture, wanted to get it out there to you that you hear the different pieces, the different programs. Christine wanted, and Dr. Turnow wanted for their respective areas. At least so that you get your thinking cap on and you'd see what we're talking about, where we're heading, what we're trying to do. Make sure that philosophically we're all on the same page.
It's very hard too with the winter bills, like not knowing the electric and
the heat
and the fuel and the gas, you know.
Say it's $50,000, that's not a lot of money, you know, and it's effective, $32 million. They say, we're gonna spend $50,000 a month for fuel, okay, we know it's not a real number, but, you know, it's close. We're talking, you know, hundreds of thousands.
Yeah, and that's why I went back to the high school tuition bill to actually see. 392 was September's bill, and then slowly from there it was 306, 307, 310, 311. Like,
we just have to stay on top of everything and parse everything out, yeah.
And East Hampton gave us a deal about a 5-year contract, right?
Well,
at
least before Mike and I got here, every year you didn't know what that tuition bill was gonna be, okay? You had a contract, but you didn't have this 2% increase. At least, the only unknown that we have is the inclusion students. That the hybrid is supposed to be based on their actual expense.
Right.
But the special ed, self-contained youngster, that's set in stone, 2% increase next year, and the general ed. And again, knock on wood, it was the general ed population that we had the most increase in, not the special ed.
Hopefully.
Well, Mike, thank you again.
Yeah, thank
You
you.
really did a great job on this
Thank you.
and the whole administration. Very much appreciate it.
I did like David's comment, because I made that comment to you, and I apologize that when she's gonna read the magic quote. Magic, the wave it again.
Oh,
I don't wanna hear it. Give it to me up front in the beginning, and then we'll go from there.
okay.
You know?
Okay. All right, I believe we are done.
So you got separate dates, okay, right?
Right, yeah, so we're just, yeah.
Julie got it.
Okay, so do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
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 Second?
Second.
Aye.
I got these,